Alright, what's up YouTube? So in this video, we're going to talk about triggered abilities. So a lot of people just tend to call things triggers, but there are 3 specific words on a card that will tell you if it's a trigger. It is at, when, or whenever. Whenever you have that wording on a card, it's saying like if this situation occurs, so like at the beginning of your upkeep, that's a trigger. If it has any other wording, it's not a triggered ability. So that matters for things like counter target triggered ability.
Yep.
If it's not worded that way, you couldn't counter it with that spell. So a lot of people get these wrong, and we're going to tell you the steps to take to fix the board state. So we are going to start with a May ability. So a good example from Standard that people are familiar with is Arboreal Grazer.
Yep.
You've played this card a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, quite a bit.
So read the card for us, Garrison.
When Arboreal Grazer enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Tapped. So when it enters, you may do this, which means if you forget the trigger, for whatever reason, it's assumed that since it's a May ability, you chose not to do it. There's no fix that you need to apply. The next card we will talk about, let me get the image up here, is a ability that you can't miss. So, Tomebound Lich. This is another card that I played tonight. You played it tonight.
Yep.
When this enters the battle, why don't you read it? You'll read, I'll talk.
When Tomebound Lich enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, then discard a card.
So there's no may in this wording, and you notice it does say whenever, so that is a triggered ability. You're going to draw and discard a card. So, if you forget to do this, you call a judge, and the judge is going to tell you how to fix the situation. In this situation, this would be, I guess we have to talk about beneficial triggers.
Yeah.
So at regular, I guess we'll get to beneficial and detrimental in a minute. So at regular REL, like F&M or Standard Showdown.
Basically anything outside of where you're like paying for a larger entry fee.
The fix is that trigger goes on the stack when it's noticed that you missed it. And that's what the judge is going to tell you to do. And there's not going to be a penalty because we're at regular REL.
And then you just proceed with the trigger.
Yeah, you resolve the trigger. If anyone wants to respond to the trigger, they're given that opportunity. So at regular REL, there's no penalty. You're putting the trigger on the stack when it was noticed. Now we're going to get to competitive REL. Let me load the next card image here. Give me a second. Let's do this one because it's in Standard. So we have Rotting Registar. So this says, at the beginning of your upkeep, that's the keyword for a triggered ability, discard a card. Now Chris, when I was playing, I'm calling you out, Chris. When you play, you did miss a discard trigger. If this happens, you call a judge. You say, Judge, my opponent missed a detrimental trigger because this card is having a negative effect on your board state. It's forcing you to discard a card. And the reason for that, obviously, is it's a undercosted large creature. So at regular REL, again, there's no penalty. We're going to put that trigger on the stack as soon as it's noticed, and we're going to let players respond and then resolve the trigger. Now at competitive REL, the penalty for a detrimental trigger is a warning. If you receive 3 of the same warnings in the tournament, you're going to be upgraded to a game loss. And again, the resolution is you put that trigger on the stack when it's noticed, and you resolve the trigger and give, whatever. If there is a way to back up the game, judges don't like to do that, so they're probably not going to. It's possible they do if not a whole lot of time has passed, and
there's also some varying situations.
Yeah, it gets very complicated for the correct resolution, but in general, you're going to get a warning for missing it, and it's going to go on the stack anyways. Now the last one we're going to talk about is a beneficial trigger, and I'm choosing a specific card to do this because a lot of people, including judges, get this one wrong.
And this one has been one that I think a lot since it's been printed.
Since its inception.
Yeah, has been very hard for people to
understand.
And
the ruling has changed. So this is going to be the current ruling, but that's not necessarily
what it was
before.
Yeah.
So this says, at the beginning of your upkeep, Dark Confidant, everybody knows Bob.
Yep.
So at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library, put it in your hand, and lose life equal to that card's converted mana cost. So a lot of people think, well, you're losing life, it has to be a detrimental trigger. But that's not true. You're playing this card because you want to have extra cards in your hand. So it is a beneficial trigger. You're doing it to draw a card, which is always a good thing. Just because you lose life doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Now, the reason for this is why it's very cool how the fix is. So if you miss this, the judge, at competitive REL, you're calling a judge over, and they're saying, okay, you missed a beneficial trigger, and that's where a lot of judges get it wrong. They think it's detrimental.
Right.
They say to your opponent at competitive REL, would you like that placed on the stack?
Now, it's a beneficial trigger for your opponent, so...
Detrimental triggers are always put on the stack. Beneficial triggers, the judge is going to ask your opponent, would you like that on the stack?
Yeah.
Now, that's where it's a really cool fix. So, if you're at 20 life, they're going to say, no, don't put that on the stack. If you're at 1 life, they're probably going to say, sure, take the trigger. And that's where intentionally missing the trigger used to be a penalty. But now, it's not a penalty. It's a beneficial trigger, so there's no penalty involved. But your opponent gets to decide your fate, which is the really cool fix for it. So that's really all we're talking about in this video. Just wanted to address the common, I guess, misconceptions about triggers.
One thing to think about is that, so if you're at a competitive REL, it is up to both players too. So keeping an eye on the things that are out there and what's happening. You do have these things, there are opportunities if you're both missing these things.
Well, yeah, so players can still receive warnings at competitive REL if they're not allowing if for not maintaining the board state, the game state, and that does happen. But basically, the bottom line is at regular REL, the triggers always happen. There's no penalties. At competitive REL, beneficial triggers are at the discretion of your opponent. No penalty. And detrimental triggers always happen, and they always result in a warning if you miss them. So that's how you handle missed triggers. That's what triggers are, because a lot of people don't actually know what they are, and they're afraid to ask. So hope that clears things up, and hope you enjoyed watching the video.